And in a few minutes, we do what we call we used to jokingly call at previous radio stations the Pumpkin Festival interview. Actually, we've got some people coming in about a community matter, a community event in a few minutes, and they'll be joining us about 8:20 this morning on Top Story. Also at 8:30, a busy, busy day. We're not going to have a lot of time to talk amongst ourselves because I've got a lot of other things going on today. We also have coming in from Trip Family Medicine, Russell Singleton. He's a physician assistant there. He'll be talking with us about weight loss today. And, a lot of people out there, obviously, it's a struggle. And he may offer you some advice today, and you may have a question or two for him on how you can go about that. Then, following 9 o'clock news, I'm going to be joined by a member of the Twin Falls City Council, and we'll spend about 15 minutes with the councilman. And then we may actually have some time to delve into a couple of other things before we wrap it all up today. So that's a bit of a lay of the land this morning on this beautiful Wednesday. All right, the weather could be better, but I got an email from a friend back east this morning telling me that they had just had two 75-degree days, and it was the warmest they had seen probably since October, and suddenly today they're looking at a high of 35. So, again, it's all relative. It's to where you live, where you happen to be, and at the moment we should appreciate what we've got, and some of the rain coming down this week is obviously going to be good for business among many people who are actually out there. They drive, you see them driving the tractors and the pickup trucks, and you see the silos and things like that sometimes when you go by their businesses. All right, we've got that all cleared up. Speaking of being out on the road, there is the new, the latest on the Idaho Transportation Funding Bill. And if you have not yet heard this, if you may have actually heard some of the details already, because I'm sure Benito was mentioning this on a frequent basis while he was actually talking during the course of AM Idaho this morning. The lone transportation funding proposal currently making its way through the Idaho legislature has gotten a nearly $127 million makeover. Now, that's a lot higher than what the House had proposed. The House had proposed about $20 million, which was less than a tenth of what the state says it needs for all the road and bridge rehab that needs to be done almost immediately. All right. Are you ready for some of the sticker shock? Let's give you some of the details on this. This is from the Associated Press. The Idaho State Senate voted 22-13 Tuesday evening on HB 312. In other words, it was a bill that originated over on the other side, which Senate members, as we were told yesterday by Steve Millington, did not like, to include higher vehicle registration fees, we expected that, and increase Idaho's gas tax by 10 cents per gallon over the next 4 years. 10 cents per gallon. Now, you're not hearing anybody say this will be permanent. We'll get back to that perhaps in just a moment or so. Republican Senator Burt Brackett from Rogerson says the amendments include strict instructions that the new money only be used for road and bridge maintenance and replacement on a state and local level. Okay, that part of it I can accept. In other words, don't toss any of this money into the general fund. It now needs to clear the House once more before heading to the governor's desk. Now, I am not going to sit here and just completely bash these people over their heads for what they've done, because they were told you need to get this done. They put it off for 6 years. They kept kicking the can down the road, and they need to raise the money somewhere. But I remember watching a few months ago an episode of The Five on Fox, and even the liberals and conservatives on that program, well, the one liberal, were in agreement that a gasoline tax is one of the most regressive taxes we have. It hurts the people who can least afford it the most. So I don't know what other solutions you have, but can there be something better? 10 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. You're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We have a caller already with us, and you're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. Hey, Bill, I agree with you that it's regressive, that it only hurts the poor people at the bottom. But I think all this is due, if you notice, Kansas, the way they constitutionally, they put it in their constitution, a balanced budget amendment. That, and when you give tax credit to the rich, it means less income coming in, so you give the government, the state government, the authority to make cuts, and they have been making cuts, and now they don't know how to make it up.
So you would say a higher, perhaps, income tax on the wealthiest bracket might bring in the money for the roads?
No, I mean if they had been not with this balanced budget amendment that they put into the Idaho Constitution, which gives them the right to make cuts in order to pay for the tax breaks that give to new businesses that come in here, and that's what happened. So now we're up to our necks in a tightrope, and now we got to pay for it.
Okay, since we don't often agree on anything, but once in a while we do, how do you go about actually finding the money? Because I don't know that I have the answer on this one. How do we go about finding the money to rebuild roads and bridges?
Now, there is grants, there is all sorts of, and I mean, if you just make it an even, everybody pays the same amount, because we all live in this state. We all have got, it's like a house. You know, if you have one of your kids that's not paying nothing, and the rest of the kids are paying something, well, you know what? That kid that ain't paying nothing, he's gonna grow up to be a bum. So that's everybody should, forget about giving tax breaks.
I am willing to pay more somewhere to get the roads fixed. I mean, I'll admit that, because I think that this is a necessity if you want commerce to continue. That's the only way you can keep the economy really rolling, is to keep the roads in good shape. But when it comes to a grant, for instance, that would be a federal grant. No grant grows on a tree. Grant money is actually collected somewhere. In order for you to get grant money, it has to be collected from someone else. So again, it's just tax money. It's not free money. And the federal government, if they have a grant, they're collecting that money all over the country. And what they're doing is they're collecting it from everyone. But if they're granting it to everyone as well, it's no different than somebody I'd rather pay the state tax than federal tax, because if you have to go through the federal government, they launder that money through a bureaucracy. They have to pay all of the people there. Then they pass it on to the states, and then the states duplicate that. Once again, sending it through the bureaucracy before it finally makes it to the point where it's supposed to go. So you've got two people who are actually dipping into that fund. So most directly, if we could, I would much rather pay state taxes than federal taxes for just about anything for that reason, especially if the federal government is doing some sort of revenue sharing or a grant program. But you've got to fix the roads. I mean, you obviously, we could let it go, and if we let it go and we get to the point where we can't move around, this is not going to fall. I think that Governor Otter, he never put it in these words, and I'm not trying to put words into his mouth, but all the way back to 2009, as I understand this, all the way back to 2009, he has been saying we got to take care of this. And he was willing to put his reputation on the line. He still had another election coming up, right? Now that he is supposedly a lame duck, he can go along and move ahead with all of this. But he threw the ball back into the court of the legislature and said, you've got to take care of this. Tell you what, he said, I'm not going to come up with a proposal myself. You do it on your own. And then we'll work on it from that point. And I think that he has been telling people for years, you can't let this one go. This is, unfortunately, there are people who tell me that they don't want to pay higher taxes. I don't want to pay higher taxes as well. However, there's a difference between a lot of my libertarian and conservative views and just plain anarchy. I had a fellow tell me years ago he didn't feel he should have to pay any taxes for road maintenance. And I said to him, okay, then you can't drive on my roads. If you're not going to share in the burden, don't drive. Stay off what I consider to be mine because I paid for it. And if you don't want to pay other taxes for fire protection, if your house burns, then don't expect anyone to come by. Now, if you can figure out a way to live and you don't need fire protection, or you'll put out the fire yourself, or you'll just take your chances, that's fine. And if you can figure out a way to live where you don't have to drive and move around, but you see, moving around is liberty in itself. It allows you to, because if you're stuck at home all the time, then you don't have a lot of liberty, especially if you in this day and age when you need to move around a lot just to find work or to sell goods. And believe me, a lot of our economy are people driving up and down the roads selling products. You're on the air. It's 8:16:39 at our studios. You're on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Okay, let's raise these taxes for the roads, and they're still not going to be fixed. That's what's happened before. We need to find out where that money is going to. I don't want to pay higher taxes for fuel if they're not going to fix the roads.
And this Senator Brackett said the same thing. He came right out and he said it. We cannot allow any of this money. They have to make sure that it is dedicated. And it was the only way, apparently, they got his support was that he said, all right, if you do this, but the other question is, after 4 years, does that gas tax sunset, or does somebody suddenly say, wow, look at all that money? Does it become permanent? That's the other fear.
Right. And, that's what they keep doing. They keep raising our gas tax here since 1980, and that's the reason the roads are in bad shape. Hi, thanks, Bill.
All right, thank you much for the call. Yeah, well, it's like pension funds all over the country. All over the country, states that had made all sorts of promises way back in the 1990s to their labor unions. And I mean, it was not just Democrats. It was Republicans as well. I was living in New York at the time when George Pataki, who had promised he was going to be a conservative governor, he was anything but. He gave the state labor unions everything they wanted because it guaranteed that George got reelected. But he made all of these highfalutin promises that nobody could keep, and his legislators went along with it because they got reelected, because all of those special interest groups showed up and voted for them. And then we had the economic downturn in the early part of the century. And when that happened in 2000 and 2001, they didn't go back and fund. They had all of the money invested in Wall Street for these pension funds. They did not go back and make up the shortfall. They just kept borrowing from other places or promising it'll be there. And then we went through the big recession in 2007, 2008. Same thing all around. It just came right back to it. We'll make sure we pay you. But they did not replenish the fund. So now you have $4 trillion, that's the latest estimate, in pension fund promises all over the country that they can't keep. And what happens if a judge comes along and says, well, you made that agreement, you have to keep it? There is a possibility that could happen, right? But you've got some situations in some big cities where the governments have had to go. And in fact, Detroit was run by the national government for a while, the federal government. They sent in someone from Washington, and his job was simply to tell the labor unions, tough tea cakes. You take this or you don't get anything. And that's what happened. So a lot of people out there are going to be bitterly disappointed because they did not fund the pension programs. And what has happened is we have people who have not yet funded road programs in many parts across the country. And unfortunately, all the bills are coming due all at once. It's like putting off your dentistry and your new eyeglasses and your diabetes, all of those things all at once. And then all of a sudden, when the bill finally comes due, you've got a lot to pay for. And we've done that. We've been running up the state and national credit cards for 80 years, all the way back to the beginning of the New Deal. Now the chickens, maybe to quote Jeremiah Wright, America's chickens have come home to roost. He said a lot of other things that weren't very nice. We should point that out. If we get a chance, I'll tell you some unchristian things that one of his devotees happened to say yesterday at a prayer breakfast, but we'll see if we can get to that. I believe we have the good folks from Idaho Gives coming up in just a few minutes. It's 8:20, at our studios, News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. This is Top Story. I have a guest joining me in the studio from Idaho Cares, and we may have two. We may have another one joining us in just a couple of minutes, but it's actually a brief window of time here anyway. Catherine, welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
You know what I should do? I have this habit once in a while of... See, there you go. Now I can hear you.
Yeah, okay.
Catherine Bossman joining us in the studio. First of all, tell me what Idaho Cares is all about.
Actually, it's Idaho Gives.
Gives, rather. Excuse me. And I've got that written right beside me.
Okay. Well, we do have an Idaho Cares, but that's in December. Idaho Gives is an opportunity for a one-day giving push for all the different nonprofits in Idaho. And we set up giving stations, and what we ask people is you can go online and you can just type in what you're passionate about, whether it's children, addiction, animals, and all the different organizations that are nonprofit that help that particular passion will be listed, and you can choose who you give to.
In other words, there are when you have all these not-for-profits or nonprofits around the state, you could be talking potentially hundreds.
Yes.
But we're living in an era, too, where there isn't a lot of money any longer from government like there may have been 25 years ago. So it's more and more critical for all of these organizations to just turn to the public and say, can you please step up to the plate?
Oh, absolutely. Nonprofit organizations, depending on what statistic you look at, save for every dollar spent, save up to $9 to $15 in cost in society. And so it's really important. And like you said, there's been so many budget cuts, so much that the government can't, and they're just not paying for anymore, that the nonprofits are picking up that slack. And there's a reality that if each person, each adult in the Twin Falls area that used Twin Falls during the day gave $10 a month, $500,000 would be going to the nonprofits.
Your friend Rachel has just joined us.
Good morning.
Rachel, what's the last name?
Davis.
Good morning. We were just talking about the fact that we've got a lot of trains near here and people on their way sometimes get stuck waiting for a train and the like. So
I missed the trains this morning, but I hit the school traffic, which is much less unforgiving.
We have just been talking in the first couple of minutes here. We've got a few minutes left about just the fact that the government funding that used to be available a lot of times is not available as it used to be, but the need has just mushroomed or exploded.
With our economy today, there's a lot of new starting businesses, whether they're for-profit or non-profit. And the next generation, I think, has been getting they've been getting a lot of flack for wanting to be lazy, but I think what they want to be a part of is a community that's really making changes. They don't care so much about things like accreditation or certification. They want to be a part of something. And so we're seeing this growth of nonprofits who are all about community, and our funding is about the community because we have a passion for service.
It's amazing you bring that up because I remember working for a television station, oh good golly, back about 1998, and I remember the people telling us that as we should approach stories that we were doing on the air, that the viewing public actually wanted to help out. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of their great concerns was when they saw a story, well, how can I help these people out? And we didn't often tell them how to do that. And I guess that's a question to ask is, on what particular day are we doing this again, just for review? And where can people find everyone? Are you going to be on the street corners or?
Well, we can talk about our event coming up. There are going to be people out on the street corners. Our key event is happening down at the new visitor center on May 7th. We're kicking off at 6:30 that morning. We'll be on KMVT News. Java's coming out and is going to be selling their coffee and pastries. We have vendors for the whole day, more than a dozen nonprofits down there by the bridge. From about 3 to 5, we'll have a big event for kids, and I just got off the phone and Facebook messaging with some talented young musicians who are going to come do live music in the evenings. We're going to canvass the restaurants. We're going to be out there with flags. Come down. Chobani's going to be there. We're going to do face painting, balloons, and then the live music in the evening. Come and give.
So you'll all be up about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly.
Well, in the reality, if you work or can't make it, you can join us. Watch the event, but just log on to idahogives.org, and everything will just pop up right there. And if you, for some reason, don't think you're going to be available on the 7th, you can go in and kind of reserve your giving.
And people could go to the website anytime,
take
right?
a look.
Yes.
Right now, go in and look at all the different wonderful and amazing things. The nonprofits have put stories up and pictures up, and just see what the nonprofits are doing in your community. It's amazing.
You can search for keywords. If you don't know one you want to give to, we're also all over Facebook and spreading the word of social media. You can get on and give a pledge today, and it'll come out for your organization on the 7th. You can give to more than one organization. Doors are open.
And could we also add to that? I've only got about 40 seconds left. So if you're doing that keyword search, if you wanted to give to a food pantry, if I put in food, I'd get some results.
Absolutely, yeah.
And obviously that's one area that I think that has really been stressed. But I'm sure that if you actually show up on the 7th, you'll meet a lot of people who can tell you the very same story.
Absolutely.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for coming by again. Can we get the website one more time?
idahogives.org.
Okay. That way, you ever notice on TV when they say, they give you the board on the screen, and you never can find the pen or pencil?
Yeah, at that time, exactly.
We want to make sure we do that twice. I want to thank both of you for coming by this morning.
Thank you so much.
I think you've got a few more stops. So it's 8:30. We've got Russell Singleton coming up from Trip Family Medicine in just a few minutes. We're going to be talking weight loss ideas. It's 38 at our studios. You're listening to Top Story.